So, believe it or not, I have patients who come to see me because they can't gain weight. Now, some of them may be cancer patients, but other of them have autoimmune diseases, which have decimated the absorptive surface of their gut wall. Let me start there. Most of you who watch me know that the lining of your gut is at least 1 to 2 tennis courts in surface area. When you're watching the Indian Wells BNP tournament, which is coming up in about a month, I want you to look at how big that tennis court is and then at least double it. Some of us think there's actually a football field inside of you, but that's the absorptive area where you can absorb proteins, sugars, and fats. Now, if you damage that absorptive area, you then shrink the size of that 1 or 2 tennis courts down to what I call a ping pong table. And I will submit to you that the reason seniors are told to increase their protein as they get older has nothing to do with the fact they need more protein in there. They need to repair the wall of their gut. In fact, in my program, we actually reduce the amount of protein in their diet, but take away the foods and substances that are damaging their gut wall, destroying the surface area, and lo and behold, they begin to gain weight and they begin to gain total protein in their blood and albumin in their blood, which is about 80% of the protein in your blood, despite purposely eating less protein than they used to before. And at least in my practice, that's proof that the problem is we've damaged through our food choices through the years, the absorptive capacity of the wall of the gut. Now, chemotherapy, unfortunately, kills off rapidly dividing cells. And the lining of our gut contain some of the most rapidly dividing cells in our body. And so it's no wonder that not only does chemotherapy make you nauseated, but usually results in weight loss because that's killed off the lining absorptive area of your gut. And that's just one of many examples. Now, there are other ways to gain weight, but the key is you want to gain weight safely and not overdo it. Now, one of the easiest ways I've found of getting people to gain weight is to have them eat a lot of macadamia nuts. And I'm always fond of telling this story. Usually during January through June, I eat 1 meal a day, an OMAD diet, usually 2 to 3 hours at night, and I fast the rest of the day. And I usually take off 10 to 15 pounds every winter and early spring by doing that. And I've been doing it now. This is my 25th year of doing it. A few years ago, I had a woman who literally had to gain weight. Won't tell you why. And I said, just start eating macadamia nuts. She said, oh, that won't work. I said, I'll tell you what. I'll do a macadamia nut challenge. I will eat 2 cups of macadamia nuts a day for the next month. And you do the same. I'll see you back in a month, and we'll see how we do. She said, you do that for me? I said, you bet I will. So I did. In 1 month, eating 2 cups of macadamia nuts a day, and believe me, they were delicious, I gained 10 pounds. She comes in, she hasn't gained an ounce. And I'm flabbergasted. I go, you're the first person. I said, look at me. Here, I'll step on the scale. And I said, I can't believe this. And she said, oh, I really didn't believe you. I thought you were joking. I didn't eat any. I'm going, what the heck? I just ate, I enjoyed the macadamia nut. I just gained 10 pounds. Now I got it off. But the point is, I don't ask people to do things without quite frankly, trying it on myself. I've never asked a patient to take a supplement without first trying it on myself and my family. So I know it works. And believe me, I've had numerous patients do the Macadamia Nut challenge, and it always works. Maybe not as dramatically as me, but it definitely works. Now, the other thing to consider is adding more avocados to your diet. Now, there is a good human study that adding one avocado a day, particularly with salads, promotes weight loss. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But at some point, 2 or 3 avocados a day is usually a very good way for gaining weight. And that's a pretty doggone good trick. Finally, carbohydrates, particularly resistant starches carbohydrates, like tubers, like jicama, like sweet potatoes, like rutabagas, like turnips, are actually very good ways for gaining weight. Raw carrots, raw beets are a pretty good way of gaining weight. If you cook them, you'll gain weight even faster. But as you'll learn in the new book, The Gut-Brain Paradox, there's some pretty good reasons to eat your carrots, eat your beets, eat your root vegetables raw or only slightly cooked, and I'll save that for another lecture. Any of the other starches that don't have lectins, millet has no lectins, sorghum has no lectins. And so if you're a person who wants to gain weight, adding these to your diet really helps. Sorghum spaghetti is a great way to gain weight. I at Gundry MD make a delicious sorghum spaghetti. And so these, which should be, in my opinion, limited for normal consumption, you can have these sorts of starches every day. And remember, we have a system for converting starches into fat. And I can watch it. I'll give you an example. I like sorghum popcorn. It tastes like popcorn, smells like popcorn, looks like popcorn. But I decided to do an experiment. Triglycerides are the first form of fat that we manufacture in our liver from carbohydrates, sugars, and starches, particularly fruit sugars. So I did a test. I measured my triglycerides, which are really remarkably low most times. And I had a cup of sorghum popcorn before dinner as my snack every day for 3 weeks. And then I measured my triglycerides. And sure enough, my triglycerides went from about 40 to about 124 in 3 weeks. Why? Because I was converting those healthy starches into fat, triglycerides. And if you're trying to gain weight, that's what you want to do. Now, I'll give you an extreme example of one of my patients recently. One of my patients went on the carnivore diet to lose weight and in general feel better. He had some real gut issues, and I was fully supportive of his choice. And he lost weight, and he felt great. So then, unbeknownst to me, he kind of got tired of the carnivore diet. And he said, I'm going to add fruit back in my diet. And so he did the carnivore diet, but added fruit back into his diet. And this gentleman was shocked when in 1 month he gained 10 pounds, strictly by adding fruit back into his diet. Now that seems, wait a minute, all he's doing is eating healthy fruit. This is a good point to stop and tell you a gift that great apes gave us that keeps on giving. About 10 million years ago, great apes suffered a genetic mutation, and they lost the ability to make an enzyme called uricase. Now, there won't be a test, so don't write it down. What uricase did was basically prevent fructose from being converted into triglycerides and into uric acid. Now, fructose, unlike other sugars like glucose, is taken directly to the liver. And because of this genetic mutation, it's converted into triglycerides and uric acid. Triglycerides are fat. Uric acid causes insulin resistance. So if you wanted to put on fat, the combination of making fat and insulin resistance is the perfect way to do it. So what? 10 million years ago, there was climate change, and believe it or not, forests shrunk dramatically. Great apes could utilize the sugar in fruit to gain weight. Regular monkeys couldn't. And so they became great apes because they had ability to store fat for the lean times. Guess who inherited that genetic mutation? You're right, us. Now, for years, it was thought to be called the thrifty gene, that we had a gene that we could store fat for the lean times, which would always be around. It's recently been discovered that the so-called thrifty gene is that genetic mutation. And that allows you and me and everybody else to take the sugar, the fructose in fruit, and convert it into fat. And I get to see this all the time. Having said that, if you want to gain weight, please, if you're going to eat fruit, eat whole fruit, because at least you'll get the fiber that feeds friendly bacteria without the worry. Now, there's no one size fits all. What I may recommend to a cancer patient to gain weight, where I really don't want them consuming fructose, which quite frankly are malignant cells' favorite food, will be different than someone who has a leaky gut and a poor absorptive surface area. So there is no one size fits all. That's another thing to remember. Half of our muscle mass is actually fat and a nice generous store of sugar called glycogen. When we bulk up by eating, for instance, like oats or corn or other sugary things, our muscles may in fact look bigger. But many times when we do an MRI, we find, or a DEXA scan, we find that in fact the muscles are larger, but they're mostly fat. And recently, I have a friend who went on one of the GLP-1 inhibitors, and he's really happy, except he's noticed that he doesn't have any legs anymore. And he said, what the heck? I used to have these gorgeous muscles in my legs, and they're all gone. That's because these drugs, 40 to 44% of the weight loss is actually in muscles. So you don't want marbled muscles, and you certainly don't want wasted muscles. So those are other tricks. Remember, weight gain, one size does not fit all. So many of my patients, their weight loss is actually from leaky gut and a loss of absorptive area. Fascinatingly, so many of my frail, elderly patients who have been told they got to eat more and more protein, and they're cramming down protein smoothies, and they're cramming down protein powders, a lot of them which contain really damaging lectins, like in whey protein, casein, and God forbid, pea protein. It's in everything now. These guys inadvertently were making matters worse because they were damaging their gut wall. And when we took those healthy, muscle-building, weight-gaining foods away from them, then they started adding muscle, and they started to gain weight naturally. In fact, I just saw a patient earlier today where that exact same thing happened, much to their surprise. So there's safe ways to gain weight. There's lots of good ways to gain weight, but you got to know your individual circumstance. One size does not fit all.
More amazing episodes just like this one, Watch now.
Increased microbial diversity, that's a good thing, and the abundance of beneficial bacteria producing, spoiler alert, short-chain fatty acids.